On today's episode of Adapt and Respond, I want to dig into the Tennessee Volunteers and talk about what I think is in the offering for them in 2026 and talk about the news that Chaz Coleman has been medically dismissed from the Volunteers program after being one of the most high-profile transfer gets in the SEC. Talk about the quarterback situation for the Volunteers, talk about who I think are their best and offensive and defensive weapons. And, well, is Josh Heupel going to have to pull another rabbit out of another hat and do some magic for the Volunteers to be good in 2026? All that after the bumper. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching Adapt and Respond, thank you for joining us here. We talk college football year-round. If you're into that, consider joining the more than 194,000 subscribers to Adapt and Respond, a college football podcast. You can also catch us on Apple and on Spotify if audio listening in those apps is your choice. But right now, you can see my face on YouTube, and as you can see, I'm smiling, dog, because we get to talk about Tennessee. Even though I want to start this conversation around what I think is some bad news for Tennessee. On Friday morning, that's June 26th, we learned that Tennessee has medically dismissed prized transfer portal defensive end Chaz Coleman. This news comes not 6 months or just after 6 months of Chaz Coleman opting to enter into the transfer portal and come out for the Volunteers. This was a great get for Tennessee. Coleman had been a 4-star recruit that was looking a lot like the next best linebacker slash defensive end, outside linebacker type that Penn State produced in what is becoming a really, really talented lineage. I mean, we could take it back to Stick City if we need to with LeVar Arrington playing linebacker, but I prefer to start with Micah Parsons and that 2016 team. Really great player. You've seen what Abdul Carter was able to do as an end at Penn State. And it looked for all the world, right? Like we were going to get like another Dennis Sutton, right, in Chaz Coleman. He's had all of the measurables, all of the intangibles that you wanted, and he looked like he was ready to blossom. And there was a bidding war to go get him. Ohio State was in on him, especially with the disillusion of the Penn State coaching staff, and Jim Knowles getting the job at Tennessee gave him an inside track. Jim Knowles, who was the defense coordinator for exactly one season and a little bit more, a little bit less than one season at Penn State, didn't go very well, but everybody knows that Coleman was going to be a guy, right? So Tennessee upped the ante and spent $2 million to go get a top 10 transfer portal recruit on the defensive side at the very least in Coleman to come play a little SEC football. But almost from the moment that he arrived in Knoxville, the chatter was it's not looking too good. There were too many signs that this was going to not work out. He exhibited the hallmarks of homesickness. He's dealing with some other undisclosed problems. And I think especially this, given the news and how they decided to deliver it, we can infer from the NCAA's definition of what medical dismissal is, why he was dismissed from the program after missing spring workouts and generally not being a part of the team. The definition given by the NCAA is an athlete's, a designation made by the university's team physician stipulating that the student athlete can no longer participate in intercollegiate athletics due to a severe injury, chronic illness, or mental health condition. There was some gossip about a head injury that he might have suffered at Penn State. It's not stipulated, it's alleged. But everybody at Tennessee seems to more or less believe the same thing. It's a tragic situation. It's not like the situation with Boo Carter last year, prize safety, Tennessee, now at Colorado, or Nico Iamaleava last year, who simply was trying to hold out for more money. And matter of fact, was making the $2 million that probably ended up in Chaz Coleman's pocket now that we think about it with the swap for quarterbacks, Joey Aguilar, whatnot. But I'm looking at a guy like Coleman, and I was thinking this is going to be one of the better players in the SEC, not just at Tennessee. I think he had a chance to be newcomer of the year. He's the kind of talent that I expected to have double-digit sacks, double-digit tackles for loss, and to genuinely be a force on Knowles' defense and perhaps help Knowles' defense get on the good foot quickly in year one. The drawback to hiring Jim Knowles is that you're probably not going to be very good in year one because that defense takes a little bit of time to stick for guys to play fast and free. So they give up a ton of big plays. They also get some big plays, but it's a whole lot of feast and famine. And when it starts to work, it looks like it did for Ohio State in 2024 or his last year at Oklahoma State or his last year at Duke. But there has been a learning curve that perhaps you were going to be able to maybe accelerate because Coleman had been in that system for at least a season, among others, like Amari Campbell, who I think is going to be a great linebacker for Tennessee as well. What I want to stress about this is just how coaches have basically said out loud, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot more often than you might think because a player like Coleman ends up at Tennessee after a furious interview process that doesn't really get to take into account all of who this player is, all of what his family is like, and all of what kind of athlete is going to play in this headspace. And in this headspace, I mean, so much of this is just we're slamming together what we think is a great player with a great program or a program that wants to be great without doing the due diligence that generally takes place over the course of high school football recruiting. As a matter of fact, when I was at the AFCA coaches convention, right, the big one where all the coaches congregate to go through clinics, but also, looking for jobs in January, February, Dave Aranda spoke to this. He said, look, I don't get to know guys in the transfer portal. I'm not always sure what I'm going to get. So I'm also having to take chances that I would not like to take. I would like to be very sure about the guy I'm getting. Whereas with the high school recruiting process, you get to know guys over the course of about 2 years. Maybe they commit after a year, but there's still guys that are coming to your campus that are learning from you that you get to see, and you get to meet their families. You get to meet their community and see what's at stake for them. This didn't happen for Chaz Coleman at Tennessee. Again, a guy that was homesick and wasn't really around the team. Again, I need to stress on Tennessee's behalf here. It's not that they're pushing him away. It's that it just wasn't clicking. It wasn't working. No matter what you thought Jim Knowles was going to be able to help or not help, this got to a point to where Tennessee needed to cut ties with Chaz Coleman before July, guys. That's a terrible look for everybody, because that means that Tennessee, who I don't really want to blame for this, but also, you bring the guy in, So many of these transfer portal acquisitions are either boom or bust. You either feel great because you land a guy like, if you're, say, Ohio State, Will Howard 2024, or you land a guy like, say, Jaden Rashada at Sacramento State. You don't know, right? Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it does not. But it's also an edge piece that they really needed at Tennessee. Like the defense that was there in 2024 fell flat on its face in 2025. I thought the offense did remarkably well, especially knowing that you didn't get Joey Aguilar really playing with his teammates until August, right? You had to go through it and ends up being a 3,500-yard passer and a great SEC quarterback, but a lot of that is because of him being a veteran. All of this is on top of, Josh Heupel is going to have to find out who his starting quarterback is, and Jim Knowles is going to have to identify somebody that can play on his defense and make those plays consistently. You got some dudes that I want to talk about here that I think could foot that bill, but one in particular that is a returnee that I would get out of his way if I was Jim Knowles and say to this defensive returnee, hey, dog, issue a defense. You just play in it. Do that Rover thing. You know what I mean? Like I had with Caleb Downs, because I think there's a role for him there. But I want to talk a little bit about the offense now that we've talked about Chaz Coleman. And, who is perhaps, I want to add their, best offensive weapon. Because When I think of Tennessee football under Josh Heupel, I think of great quarterback play. I think of great running backs. I think about the veer and shoot, which is an offense that I really, really love because it is the epitome of the college offense. And in being the epitome of the college offense, it does not really extend itself to being good at the professional level because a lot of it has to do with things you just would not be able to get away with at the NFL level. Wide splits for the wide receivers, basically running a couple of routes and also telling the wide receivers to take run plays off, right? You don't really need to block. We need you to run post. We need you to run go. So save your energy for that. We're going to try to tell the defense, show us your look. Show us what you're in with these wide splits and these interesting run combinations. But if you can get it to work, it works really well, especially if you can run it at tempo. It's not an offense that works great if you can't run it at tempo because it is simple, but in its simplicity makes it elite, right? That's what you need at the quarterback position to make it go. But like most great offenses, it starts with having a great tailback. And they got one of those, right? They got a great tailback in Deshaun Bishop, who I identified last year as a really, really great player who I thought had the opportunity to do what Dylan Sampson had done and be their best player at Tennessee this year. Because there's a lot of Peyton Lewis on this one, but I just saw it, man. He's got wiggle, he's got speed, he's got burst. And last year he got showcased that. It's not just that he rushed for over 1,000 yards as Tennessee's number one tailback. It's that he had 14 rushes for 123 against Alabama. An Alabama defense that turned out to be pretty good, makes college football playoff, beats Oklahoma, makes it to the second round of the playoffs, gets thumped by Indiana. But I think you could also make an argument that Deshaun Bishop goes from being a 1,000-yard tailback to a 1,400-yard tailback, especially given this quarterback situation, which we'll talk about here in a bit. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Brandon Staley and Mag Matthews are also right there. Guys that had over 800 yards receiving and can take the top off the defense anytime they want. You're going to have at least 3 skill players that can get it done for you and get it done in a hurry. It's not the offense that I'm worried about at Tennessee. In fact, I haven't worried about the offense at Tennessee since 2022 when Hendon Hooker was playing like a Heisman Trophy winner before he got hurt. Still one of the better reclamation projects I've ever seen in college football. Hendon Hooker was damaged goods at Virginia Tech, right? Nobody really wanted to put that guy on a football field and have him start, except Josh Heupel. Brought that dude in, taught him how to run the offense, and all of a sudden, we got a Tennessee team that looks like one of the best in the country, let alone in the SEC. Just fell a little bit short. If he doesn't blow out his ACL, we're looking at a totally different outcome for Tennessee. Then you run it back with a couple years later, Nico Iamaleava in 2024, when you got a guy who got to basically exist in his first year as a starter, handing the ball to Dylan Sampson every now and again, needing to complete a pass and match protect, and you make the college football playoff. And I thought those were great building blocks for this Vols team going into the 2025 season when he blew it up. Blew it up to such a degree that would they have made the college football playoff again if he was their starting quarterback? No, because they didn't with Joey Aguilar, who I thought was just as good. But you also have this culture shock for many. And by culture shock, I mean the idea that the culture can shock you, that the culture at Tennessee is more powerful than any one player. I love that. I do. And I think most college football fans do, because we're in a spot where so many players are getting paid so much money. Back to Chaz Coleman, being a $2 million dude at 19 years old might do something to your head in as far as how you think about yourself and what people have to say about you. But again, it's not the offense that I'm worried about. It's the defense. And that's the reason why you saw Josh Heupel go from having a Broyles Award finalist to firing a guy and needing to bring in another Broyles Award finalist, hoping that he can match this one with his tempo-oriented veer and shoot Jim Knowles, which leads me back to this conversation around who I think their best defensive player is at Tennessee. And before Chaz Coleman was medically dismissed, I would have told you I expected him to be that guy. Before Chaz Coleman was medically dismissed, I would have told you that I expected him to be SEC Newcomer of the Year, especially given his upside. Now, we got to have a different conversation, right? There are some people that would be leaning toward Arian Carter with 28 solo tackles last year. It was pretty decent for them. Amari Campbell, who was also good at Penn State last year. But I'm going to look to the secondary, man. I'm looking at Idris Farouk, man. Perhaps you didn't know it, but Idris Farouk was probably the best safety in the SEC that just didn't hear his name called nationally that enough. It's a dude that had 76 tackles, 4 forced fumbles, and 2 picks and 3 passes defended at the safety position. That is 100% getting it done. If I'm Knowles and I'm playing 5 defensive backs, I got him in the Caleb Downs position, right? Which is to say, I got you close to the line of scrimmage. I got you roaming around. I got you doing what I might have had Isaiah Simmons doing if I had him do at Clemson. You've just got an athlete that can go make plays for you and hits like a freight train, knows where the ball is, puts his hand on it, strips it clean, and has ball skills. Put that dude in as many situations to wreak havoc as you possibly can. I think this is their best defensive weapon going into the 2026 season, and I expect to see him featured quite a bit. Outside of that, you really need this defensive line to gel. Like, I'm looking at Xavier Gilliam coming over from Penn State, 300 pounds. He has a lot of upsides in nose tackle position, but it's really difficult to look at a totally new defensive line and say they should go be elite. But it's going to have a lot to do. Plus, I mentioned earlier to start this show, the Tennessee defensive game plan might take a little bit of time to sink in. But I think it's got a shot. Maybe Jim Knowles has found a way to accelerate the growth after having installed this defense at the Power 4 level, like Duke, Oklahoma State, Ohio State, Penn State, now a 5th time at Tennessee. Maybe he's learned some things or two, and maybe it's just what it is. The thing that I think is really going to be at the top of most people's minds, though, when we're talking about Tennessee is the quarterback situation. We've done a few segments about this. Faizon Brandon and George McIntyre are in a derby right now to be the starting quarterback. Many believe that George McIntyre's got the inside track here, having been in the system, having been around, having run off the competition and or invited competition, right, in 5-star quarterback Faizon Brandon. I think Brandon's going to be the week 1 starter because he's got the most upside, and frankly, he's just more talented than George McIntyre. But also, does he have control of the offense? He seems to. Does he have the buy-in of the locker room? He seems to. I also trust Josh Heupel to get this one right. If Josh Heupel gets this one right, like he does everything else, things will start to fall into place for Tennessee. And that's a good thing because this is a year in which I think that Tennessee can reach the college football playoff because the schedule will allow them to do just that. Take a look at this, right? I was doing this as I'm looking at how tough the schedule is going through each one of these previews. You don't play Georgia. You've done playing Oklahoma for a little while. You don't really have to entertain anybody other than 4 teams that I think might have a shot to beat you. Like, honestly, this is looking at the whole of the schedule, but their toughest opponents are Texas, Alabama. You're at Texas A&M. That could be tough. And LSU. 3 of those games are at Neyland. All right. Only one of those games is on the road. That's a doable schedule. And if we're talking about teams that could show up and do what Ole Miss had done last year, just kind of run through the schedule and or end up with an invitation to the college football playoff without needing to play in the SEC championship game, I'd put Tennessee on that list. Because if you win 3 out of 4 of these, and LSU is as good as we think they're going to be, and Texas, Alabama, A&M don't fall off a cliff, it's not hard for me to see a 10-win team out of Tennessee, but maybe you got losses to, I don't know, Alabama and Texas. Maybe, right? But if both of those teams are ranked in the top 10 and they're getting to play each other in the SEC championship game, you're going to get in. It's just how it's going to go. Can you keep that up, though? That's a question. Can you keep that up, man? Can you not drop a game to someone that you shouldn't? Because when I look at the schedule, I'm almost terrified because I'm like, ooh, it's not easy. Nothing in the SEC is easy, but this is about as easy as it gets. Like, for perspective, You could take a look at Mississippi State's schedule, because I was just taking a look at that, and that one's nasty there at the end, man. Matter of fact, they've got a gauntlet run, and I do mean this in the HMS Royal George 1760 term of the word. For those y'all don't know, a fella named Francis Lanyon was forced to run down the Royal George deck 3 times in a gauntlet run where people had cat o' nine tails and things to hit him with. He had to do that as punishment 3 times in a row. That's the gauntlet run. Mississippi State has top 25 opponents over four consecutive top 25 opponents over 5 weeks. Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas. Put that up against the toughest teams that Tennessee has to play: Texas, Alabama, at A&M, and LSU. I'd take Tennessee's schedule. I would. Again, all we're talking about is if the defense can keep up at their end. If the defense keeps up their end, don't be surprised if Tennessee's right back in the college football playoff for a second time in 3 years. All right, that's today's episode of Adapt and Respond. If you like the show, send it to a friend, share it, and join the more than 194,000 subscribers to Adapt and Respond College Football Podcast.